Greetings. This is Astrology 101, Sun, Moon, and Rising Signs, and I'm your host, Seth Roback. We're going to discuss popular versus professional astrology, the Sun, Moon, and Rising sign, the Zodiac, which is the star almanac of the ancients, the modes of the Zodiac, and the elements of the Zodiac, and the Zodiac signs through the seasons. Let's talk about popular versus professional astrology. Popular horoscopes that you see in the newspaper are based on a person's sun sign. Predictions made for everyone born within the same month. But the question is, how can it be accurate? Daily horoscopes give astrology a bad name because it's, 1 out of every 12 person. So one of 12 people, so to speak, who's Sagittarius is going to have this same fortune. A business or home-based opportunity will make you excited. I guess that could apply to anyone. However, there's still some paperwork to sort out. So, as you can see, the accuracy is questionable. Let's look at a professional astrology chart. Now, just look at that, how much information there is there. There's many different variables. Sun, Moon, Rising sign defines all the planets by zodiac sign and position of the Earth at the time of birth. And it looks at all the relationships between the planets. So, this video is really about typology. Just as there's the Myers-Briggs typology, and Enneagram typologies. I'm sure you've taken a personality test at some point that describes your type. But the astrology one is, in my opinion, the easiest to understand and the most accurate. So you have the sun, whatever your sun sign is. That's what we're mostly familiar with. Most people know their sun sign. The moon, and the rising sign, Ascendant. So people who are familiar with astrology will always introduce themselves to other astrologers by their sun, moon, and rising sign, because that gives you a quick sense of what the person's like. So let's discuss the sun sign. The sun sign describes your creative self-expression, your quest for self-realization, your identity and ego, and it switches signs about every month and does a return every year, meaning it goes full orbit it doesn't orbit, the Earth orbits the sun in 1 year. Let's talk about the moon sign. So the moon sign being kind of the counterpoint to the sun being a yang and moon being yin, moon sign has to do with psychology, emotions and sensitivity, family and home, comfort and security, and it switches signs about every 2 to 3 days and does a return every 27 to 28 days, which is close to 30 days, and that's why we call, in our dates we use the term month, which originally came from moon. It was to describe the full cycle of the moon. But, in some cultures they still have a calendar based on the moon, such as traditional Chinese calendar follows the moon. And then you have the rising sign, which is the eastern horizon where everything rises from. It describes your appearance and behavior, and it switches signs about every 2 hours, and that's what a day is. It's 24 hours, so that's when the Earth is completely rotated. So let's look at the Zodiac, the star almanac of the ancients. Where did this Zodiac come from? In ancient Egypt, the ceiling stone of the Hathor temple has a carving of the first complete Zodiac, at least the first one that's been intact, called the Dendera Zodiac, dated at around 50 BC. The Dendera Zodiac served as an almanac describing the seasonal activities surrounding the river Nile. So this is the ceiling piece to that temple. So here's a zodiac of all the signs. And one thing to notice about the zodiac is that, we start to the left of Aries and go counterclockwise. Aries, Taurus, Gemini. So Aries is the beginning of spring and all that. So when you look at a zodiac, you want to look at it counterclockwise, one like this. So let's talk about the equinoxes. That comes in the spring and the fall. The spring one is between Pisces and Aries, and the fall one between Virgo and Libra, and that tells you when there's equal days and equal daylight hours and equal nighttime hours. And then you have the two solstices, the summer solstice between Gemini and Cancer that has the longest hours of daylight, and the winter solstice between Sagittarius and Capricorn, which is when we have the fewest hours of sunlight, at least in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, it's reversed. So anyways, so between the spring equinox and the summer solstice is spring. Between the summer solstice and the fall equinox is summer. Between the fall equinox and the winter solstice is fall. And then after the winter solstice is winter. That starts over with spring again. So some of you may already be familiar with this, but really the signs are created based on these equinoxes and solstices, which is why they don't exactly fit in with the month. When a sign begins, usually, like, for example, Aries would be sometime March 20th to 22nd, and would end April 20th to 22nd, as opposed to being April, because it starts at the equinox. So every year it oscillates. And so our Julian calendar that we have is the same every year. But the equinoxes and the solstices, those dates shift. And between those dates, between the equinoxes and the solstices, are divided into three sections: a beginning, middle, and end of that particular season. So that's kind of the logic behind the astrological wheel, was to identify those seasons. So let's talk about the modes of the zodiac wheel. They divide up the seasons. There's a beginning season, a middle of the season, and the end of the season. If you notice all the way to the left, it has Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn that mark the beginning of a particular season. Aries, spring; Cancer, the summer; Libra, the fall; and Capricorn is the beginning of the winter. Then in the middle, fixed signs are right in the center of the season, right in the middle, which is Taurus is in the middle of spring, in May, around May time. Leo is in the middle of summer in August. Scorpio in the middle of fall in November. And Aquarius in the middle of winter in February. And then the end of the season are called the Mutable Signs. And you have Gemini at the end of spring, Virgo at the end of summer, Sagittarius at the end of fall, and Pisces at the end of winter. So, like the fates, one spins the yarn, the other measures it, and the last one cuts it. So, a beginning, middle, and end. I thought that was a good picture to show kind of the beginning, middle, and end of each season. So let's talk about the cardinal signs. That's Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And they're the beginning of each season, starting with the spring or fall equinox or the summer and winter solstice. So here we have them circled again. Aries being the beginning of spring, Cancer the beginning of summer, Libra the beginning of fall, and Capricorn the beginning of winter. And those particular signs, because they're the start of a season, initiate change. It's a burst of energy, like the Knight of Swords here. So people with a lot of cardinal signs tend to initiate change. They tend to start something, start projects, and can disrupt or cause a change in routines. So in some ways, they're pioneers. In other ways, they kind of destroy old foundations. Look at the fixed signs of Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus. And that signifies the middle of a season. So you have Taurus in the middle of spring, Leo in the middle of summer, Scorpio in the middle of fall, Aquarius in the middle of winter. So because they're right in the center of the season, they're the most consistent. Taurus in the month of May or the end of April towards the end of May is right in the heart of spring, when there's the most fertility and the most flowers and blooming and that kind of thing that you associate with Taurus. Leo is the hottest time, Scorpio and Aquarius. So they're right in the center of it, so they're very consistent. Now, people with a lot of fixed signs have this consistent personality. They are the same every day, more so. But that can lead to stubbornness on the flip side. And I think of the King of Pentacles because he's kind of a solid, earthy ruler. I mean, they're not all earth signs, but just he's fixed in his place. Let's talk about the mutable signs. Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo. They signify the end of each season, ending at the end of those time periods with the spring or fall equinox or the summer and winter solstice. So as you see here, Gemini's the end of spring, Virgo the end of summer, Sagittarius the end of fall, and Pisces the end of winter. And as you can see in this graphic here, a dandelion, mutable quality that symbolizes being adaptable to change. So being blown in the wind, allowing to go with the flow, so to speak. And I think of the Page of Cups as sort of being very flexible and changeable, kind of taking instructions from someone else. So that's that. Anyways, let's talk about the four elements of fire, earth, air, and water. Starting with the fire signs of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Aries, so they're spread out a little farther apart, and those are the fire signs. And they symbolize leadership, action, desire, inspiration, and motivation. So people with a lot of planets or emphasis in these signs have fiery personalities. The earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And they're sensual, practical, and they're in the here and now. So they're the grounded people. That's Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. as you see how they fall in the zodiac. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And they represent abstract intellect, social grace, communication, and innovation. So they kind of have the eagle's eye. They see the big picture. You know, they look from up above in the sky, how things look down below. Whereas the earth people are down in the dirt, experiencing things firsthand. The air signs can put things into the abstract, can see the big picture. Water signs. That's Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And they're known for sensitivity, emotions, understanding of psychology, having strong intuitions. I mean, every sign has intuitions, but water signs in particular have strong ones because they're very sensitive. And having personal connections, feeling bonded to people, as well as artistic expression. So let's talk about the spring zodiac, which is Aries, the ram, Taurus, the bull, and Gemini, the twins. So the beginning, middle, and end of spring. So starting with Aries, which is a cardinal fire, cardinal being the first of the sign of the spring, and as we said, it has Aries has fiery characteristics. So it's the first sign of the zodiac, the battering ram. So after the spring equinox, when the rams battle with each other over mating privileges, basically. So people with a lot of Aries or strong Aries influence, you know, the sun, moon, or ascendant, have an element to them of competition, courage, and adventure. And they're ruled by Mars, the planet of war, which makes sense. So these kind of people are the warriors of the zodiac. So an example of Aries, here we have, so if you have Sun in Aries, Sun being self-expression, self-realization, you're willing to fight for your recognition, fight for your identity. With Moon in the Aries, it signifies that's your emotional inner world. So someone with kind of that warring energy has anger and passion oftentimes. Now, a rising sign having to do more with your physical attributes and your disposition, your behaviors. Rising sign would have tough athletic features, probably more of a muscular build, an ectomorph. So looking at the Taurus, the next sign in spring, is the fixed Earth because it's fixed, it's right in the heart of spring, so it's very consistent and it has Earth-like qualities. And it's the second sign of the zodiac, mid-spring, when the bulls breed with the cows. So it's a very fertile time, you know. April showers lead to May flowers. So this is when everything starts to blossom and bloom. And at a time when animal husbandry with cows and cattle, you know, were bred through the bulls. So it represents abundance, you know, this fertility, sensuality, but also possessions and property. And it's ruled by Venus, the planet of love. You know, basically because there's breeding and sexuality involved. So an example of fixed Earth, if you have a sun in Taurus, your identity, you go through, you gauge yourself, you know, your self-expression through your possessions, the things you own, the comforts. I also notice that Sun in Taurus people are very generous. That's how they oftentimes show their affection and love, is by giving you something that's very special to them. They don't necessarily have a lot of possessions, but the things they do, they identify with personally. So if you have your moon in Taurus, this is someone that gets comfort and nurtures themselves and others through physical things. So kind of physical comfort. These people like touch and sensuality, and that sort of thing. So when you see it in a rising sign, it tends to be like this guy in the Nine of Cups, kind of thicker features, some weight put on the person, not necessarily, overweight, but just more of a thicker weight, kind of like what you think of with a bull, but not so muscular and no fat like the Aries, tends to have a more sculpted look, whereas the Taurus is more kind of a solid, earthy feel to them, being fixed earth. So now we go to Mutable Air. Mutable because it's the last sign of, or the last period of spring, when the sun's in this constellation. And it's mutable because the season is winding down. So it means it's transitioning to the next season. Usually when people think of summer, they think of it starting in June, and not necessarily in towards July, not towards the end of June, but more towards the beginning or middle of June is really when it starts to feel like summer, and that's because it's transitioning from spring to summer in this time period. So it's the third sign of the Zodiac, representing the end of spring, and the original mythology were twins that hatched out of an egg. So it kind of represents, all the little ducks and geese and different birds have laid their eggs and they're starting to hatch at about this time. So you see these two twins together, and it symbolizes, the youth, of youthful curiosity, communication, and siblings. So kind of the cognitive functions that you see happen with a child, where they're learning to identify their world. And so people with Gemini characteristics tend to look at the world with enthusiasm like children and have a youthful look to them, like this fascination with different things. And it's ruled by Mercury, the planet of intellect. So when you look at Sun in Gemini, that's about self-expression and identity. So this is someone who likes to communicate, to both discover themselves, learn about themselves through reading and interacting with people, or to be a writer or author, or what I'm doing, building videos. I'm not a Gemini Sun, but a lot of Gemini Suns express themselves through poetry or journaling, that sort of thing. Also, the Gemini Sun, their identity is oftentimes identified with their relationship to their siblings. So when you have a moon in Gemini, or Gemini moon, the moon having to do with what nurtures you, what gives you comfort, how do you give comfort or nurture other people, your relationship to family. So when you have Gemini there, this kind of intellectually curious, expressive type of sign, the words, these are people that like to read things that fulfill. They like to read certain books that make them happy, or maybe inspirational type of reading as well, or they like to write their thoughts down, and that gives them emotional fulfillment. Also, this is someone that would show love through talking to someone, by telling them. So they express their emotions through words. And then when you have a rising sign with Gemini, the person's body, they embody this kind of youthful vigor and fascination and open-eyedness. So they tend to have wiry features and very excitable and kind of mischievous, like little kids can be. They love to have fun and play. So that would be their disposition. So now let's look at the summer zodiac, beginning with Cancer, Leo, and then ending with Virgo. So starting with cardinal water, which is, the beginning, being cardinal and having watery characteristics. That's Cancer, is the fourth sign of the zodiac and represents the summer solstice. So it's when daylight retreats, when after the summer solstice, the hours of daylight start to decrease. And the idea of Cancer, if you look at the symbol up above, was originally representative of dung beetles that would move backwards into a dung heap, and that's the back feet that are lifting the dung there, in that symbol, and they move backwards to lay their eggs for protection. And then later on that was adapted to a crab, that retreats into its shell or under a rock, that sort of thing. So it's that idea, the concept of sunlight retreating as well. And so that's where that sign came from and why it uses the symbol of the crab. So the characteristics of Cancer have to do with home, family, security, emotions. So we retreat into our homes at night for protection, shelter. We rely on family. We, support each other. Those sort of things. It's kind of the mother. Well, it does represent motherhood or maternal instincts of protection, caring, and nurturing the young. And it's ruled by Moon, representing the mother, security, and psychology. So it's kind of your inner world, introversion. So if you have your sun in Cancer, which I have, you're on a quest. I have lots of dreams where I'm trying to find home, or I'm trying to find my way back home. I'm lost somewhere, and it's like this holy grail quest that I will find a home environment. So sun in Cancers, I've noticed a consistent thread, are people who are trying to put roots down somewhere. But it's kind of a lifelong pursuit of doing that, of creating security and safety. It's a hard sun sign to have, because the sun sign you don't ever fully realize. It's like your lifelong quest that you seek after. So sun in Cancer is looking for a home. The moon rules Cancer, so it just emphasizes the characteristics of Cancer of being maternal, and I think of the Empress because she has a loose gown that, she's likely that she's pregnant and caring for, the next heir to the throne or whatever. And so, the moon has all the same instincts as a planet that the Cancer sign has. And so their emotional life is going to be very strong. Whenever something's in its rulership, it means it's emphasized more so than than the sun or the other planets or aspects that are not in the rulerships that would stand out. So a rising sign in Cancer would be someone that looks kind of like the moon. Either the full moon, they have rounder features, or narrow, like in skinny, like a crescent moon. You tend to find these two characteristics in Cancer rising. So the fixed fire, middle of summer, the hottest time of the year, which is why it's a lion. Lion kind of looks like sunshine, its mane. It's a fifth sign. So it represents charisma, self-expression, self-realization, and romance, passion, anything you think of, heat. So this is a radiant personality. And it's ruled by the sun, representing creative self-expression. I mean, our solar system, everything here in the solar system came from the sun, or maybe other stars as well. So we're all made up of star material. So it's this radiant energy that creates things, if you think of the role of the sun, and also keeps it together. So a sun in Leo would be in its rulership, so it really emphasizes the characteristics of Leo, of someone who had a very charismatic personality. And it's no wonder that Apollo was always associated with sunlight, as you see here to the right. He was all about self-expression and was this kind of a person that inspired people, that chased after love and romance, but never quite got it, because the sun is always pursuing, but never obtaining. It's like an ideal in front of you that you're trying to get. Now, if your moon's in Leo, this means your home and family life, your personal life, you take a lot of pride in. Like you feel very inspired by your home and your family environment, your personal environment. So this is someone that identifies themselves and expresses themselves through their personal life, because those two are kind of connected to each other that way. And then if you have a rising sign in Leo, this is someone that looks very regal and has kind of a certain vitality, a certain enthusiasm to them. People like to be around this person. They tend to like that because he's uplifting or she's uplifting. Sometimes it can be overbearing as well. That's on the negative side. So they can be too much and they can get their feelings hurt a lot. That's Leo's the sign of the heart and has to do with, sometimes heartbreak. So let's look at the mutable Earth. This is the end of summer, being mutable. And it's the sixth sign of the Zodiac, which is Virgo. It represents summer's end, and that's the harvest season, end of, the beginning of harvest season. And it has the, is it Demeter holding the wheat? Is the angel of the harvest season. So very often there were, symbolic harvest maidens that would hold the wheat. And if you look at the symbol of Virgo, it looks like two arms, one holding something, like a strand of wheat, like you see up in the symbol and you see to the right in the picture. So this is someone who has characteristics of being analytical and being able to separate the wheat from the chaff, because when you think of harvesting, what do we use, what do we eat, and then what do we get rid of? It's kind of how a Virgo's mind thinks. So Virgo is very refined, and they're very focused on health, cleanliness. They're also very much focused on their service in society. kind of the job that they do, their specialization, that they try to contribute something in their own unique way. And then ruled by Mercury, just like Gemini, it's kind of a different aspect of Mercury, a different way of applying intellect. In Gemini, Mercury's qualities of communication and learning and observation, kind of a fresh set of eyes. In Virgo, the Virgo aspect of Mercury has to do with being analytical, and Mercury was also in mythology was a healer. It's also focusing on health. So if you have your sun in Virgo, this is someone that's constantly improving themselves or looking to improve themselves, because the sun is your expression of self, and Virgo is sort of, refining, pulling the weed out from the chaff, and so I see this a lot with Virgo suns. They also, tend to show their love by giving you helpful pointers quite a bit. I'm married to one. I love her, but sometimes, I'm not in the mood to improve myself. So when you have the moon in Virgo, this describes their home environment. It'd be very clean. Not necessarily, there might be piles of clutter in different places, but the Virgo, with their analytical mind, knows where everything goes. One other thing to notice about Virgo is Virgo focuses on details as well. So, they can keep long lists of all the items they have in their mind, of all the little intricacies. Also, a moon in Virgo being an expression of comfort and safety and security has to do with improving health and focusing on health. This is someone that's aware of the importance of exercise and good, clean, wholesome food too. So they're the kind of people that make sure their family eats well, eats healthy. And so if you have a rising sign in Virgo, you're going to have refined features, and that's kind of where I got this photograph from. This is kind of a Creole gentleman that's in Louisiana, but you look at his features, they're kind of fine, and he has a certain refinement to him. And you see that a lot in Virgo rising or ascendant signs. So now we're moving into fall, where we have Libra beginning, Scorpio in the middle, and Sagittarius towards the end. We look at the beginning being cardinal and an air sign with intellectual, abstract qualities. So Libra is the seventh sign of the Zodiac and follows the autumn equinox. And the reason it's the symbol that you see here is the scales out on the constellations. And the reason it's a scales is it shows equality, because during the equinox there's equal daylight hours to nighttime hours. So the sun rises at 6 in the morning and sets at 6 at night, right in the middle, and divides, the 24 hours in half by day and night. So Libras have that quality of balance and relationship. They're constantly balancing the relationship and creating balance. They're ruled by Venus, the planet of love, also relationships. So equal give and take, that sort of thing. So if you have your sun in Libra, this is someone who expresses themselves and looks for self-realization through relationship. So their own personal identity is connected to the partner who they're with. So here I see I thought the Lover's card really fits, because this is about the relationship between these two. That the angel up above symbolizes that connection, or I think it's probably Michael or whatever archangel that chased him out of the garden, but whatever. And I'll just make it up that it's the angel of relationship, the connection between these two. Moon in Libra is someone that their personal life has more to do with their relationship. So how they find comfort and security is through the relationship, as opposed to their soul or their self or some spiritual ideal that's out there that you see with the sun. Moon brings it down home. This is someone who takes care of their day-to-day needs through a partnership. So when you have a rising sign, then this kind of person has soft features, very balanced, pleasing look to them, and have a nice voice. When they talk to you, there's a certain sweetness to it, as like something aesthetically pleasing, because Libra also has to do with aesthetics. You go into a Libra's house and all the colors are coordinated. Everything looks the way it's supposed to look in their mind, as opposed to random, which is how I tend to do it. So I get a little nervous in Libra, and the houses going to Libra's home, like my one aunt. She's, has such a beautiful house, but I'm afraid I'll mess it up going in there. Anyways, so let's talk about fixed water in the middle of fall, being fixed, and watery characteristics. The 8th sign of the Zodiac is Scorpio. So this is when we really descend into the dark, when it starts to get colder. It's towards the end of October, and Halloween. And so there's this kind of feeling of going into the void, into the chasm. And by this time, the leaves are really falling off the trees, and over time they'll turn to mulch in the soil, which will give new life. So it's about regeneration. And so Scorpio is kind of this deadly, virile arachnid, that's hiding under rocks and that kind of thing. So a Scorpio is intense. Intense emotions. They're very secretive. The scorpion does hide in rocks and hides in different places, and they'll go in your shoe, for example. You put on your shoe and zap, they got you. So there's this intense and secretive, protective nature about them, but they're also regenerative, because they symbolize death, but through the death, creating new life, rebirth. So another symbol that represents Scorpio is the snake that sheds its skin, or any kind of animal that does that. They shed off the old so that there's room for the new. And they're very resourceful as well in that sense. And also represent sexual and survival instincts. So Scorpio are aware of those instincts, what it takes to survive, because it's descending into the darker hours, into the colder weather. And it's ruled by Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth. I like to think of that planet as transformation. And out with the old and in with the new, The leaves falling off the tree, shedding your skin, those sort of processes. So, if you have your sun in Scorpio, this is someone whose identity often goes through upheavals. This person is constantly redefining themselves. They get rid of their ideals that don't work for them, so they can go towards something that does work for them, some goal or spiritual ideal that they are seeking in themselves, that they want to express. So you see a Scorpio, 10 years later, they'll be the same person, but they're looking to be more genuine to their true self. Is kind of what they're about. So they become more themselves over time. They learn more about themselves. So when you have a moon in Scorpio, which is what I have, you have a lot of intense emotions, and also sensitivity to how things work behind the scenes. This is someone that can read other people, that can look at the way they carry themselves and their look about them, or even looking, for me, looking at an astrology chart, I'm really sensitive to the other person. I can kind of identify them, because the moon is about sensitivity. And now if you have your rising sign in Scorpio, this person has kind of secretive, shadowy, seductive feature. This is your kind of, gypsy woman with the dark, mysterious features that you don't want to get her angry because she'll put a curse on you, or the darker, kind of more mysterious man that women tend to be, or whoever tends to be drawn towards them because of that mysterious nature to them. So there's this kind of erotic presence to them when they have it in the rising sign. So now let's look at the end of fall, Sagittarius, being mutable, so it's transitioning to winter and having fiery characteristics. So it's the 9th sign of the Zodiac, and it's the end of autumn, and this is, I think of Sagittarius being the centaur who shoots an arrow. So this is often a time when people migrate south in colder climates, and people who migrate in general, because a horse travels across the distance. So these people are kind of have this wild element, like a wild horse. They're very expansive. They kind of skirt along the outskirts of society, so they have a certain bohemian element to them. They're seeking for a broad truth, a worldview. All the different places they've been help them discover new things about themselves and others. They have a breadth of cultural understanding. So they're also philosophical, have an incredible worldview, and it's ruled by Jupiter, which represents expansion, growth, but also cultural values. Jupiter usually in the chart, we'll go into it in the second video, has to do with someone's ethics and morals and, kind of their culture that they've been brought up in. And Sag has an expansive view of that. So if you have your sun in Sagittarius, you have this boundless enthusiasm. This is someone that's optimistic. They're searching for, they create and express themselves and find themselves through looking at the expansiveness of life. So there's a certain sense of optimism that they have. And that's kind of their fiery nature, is this expansive enthusiasm, kind of a warmth to them and a charisma. When you have your moon in Sagittarius, this is someone that I found with a lot of the moon in Sagittarius is they need wisdom. They need truth. They need to get out of their environment that they're in and go somewhere else and throw it off, change their environment, and see what they discover about themselves. This is somebody that does need to stir the porridge, you know, and not get stuck somewhere. There's a certain need for freedom, and that to them brings them inner peace. And my wife has this, and she really does need to travel and go places. But interestingly enough, Sagittarius can also be very happy just going out into nature as well. Anything that takes them out of their environment and gives them a fresh new perspective. And I think of the fool who's just kind of wandering out there needing that. So when you see a Sagittarius rising like myself, there's a certain wild, unkempt look to them and a certain restless energy. You see how I talk and kind of burst. There's this enthusiasm. Everything they do with a certain vigor and an enthusiasm. You know, their walk has a certain intensity to that. As someone searching for something. So we're going in the last part here of the winter zodiac. You have Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. The beginning, middle, and end. Cardinal Earth, the beginning of winter, is the 10th sign of the zodiac, Capricorn, representing the winter solstice, the period right after that. And you think of winter, that's when resources are really scarce and the climate is harsh. It's getting cold or wet or whatever. It's kind of a time when there's not much. And goats can survive in these harsh climates and go without food and water. And the original goat, the sea goat, I think represented Enki, an ancient Sumerian culture that gave civilization or taught civilization to the humans. As well as there's been different mythical characters like Azazel or different ones that taught the Hebrews about civilization. You know, it's always this goat that teaches humans how to survive. And I think it's because they know how to conserve resources. You know, they can go long time without food or water. They can go up, balance themselves on steep cliffs. So they know how to do things, kind of sign. And they're ruled by Saturn, the planet of limitation and discipline. So if you have your sun in Capricorn, this is somebody who's ambitious, who's a social climber. They try to achieve things, and they're highly competent. You know, at least that's all my interactions with sun signs of Capricorn. When your moon's in Capricorn, it can be hard. That's a hard moon to have, but this makes someone very reserved and private, but very sensitive underneath. So their moon is very protected. They have to really trust you to share their personal life with you, and oftentimes this type of person can be lonely because they're used to being tough. They're kind of tough goats, you know. And then if you have your rising sign in Capricorn, this is someone who's conservative. They have a kind of a conservative look. They often look sickly and have a solemn look. And I thought of President Lincoln. You know, all the charts I've seen have shown that he's Aquarius, but very close to Capricorn. I mean, you know, I don't think they had accurate birth records of time, you know, during the time of Lincoln's birth. So I always think of him as kind of Capricorn. He's kind of got gaunt features and sort of looks like a goat almost, you know, and he has this kind of somber, solemn presence. He dresses, you know, somewhat conservatively for the time, and just has that kind of tough, you think of what he went through with the Civil War. That was a real harsh environment for him, and they're tough like that. They can survive. So now let's look at the middle of winter, Aquarius, which is fixed air. And it's the 11th sign of the Zodiac. It's midwinter. And in the original Zodiac, it represented when the Nile was overflooded. And again, it's a symbol of civilization, because cities have always started, our early civilizations have always started around rivers or water, some water source, and being able to direct that water source into crops to provide food for a big population. So you think of the Aquarius as the water bearer, as irrigating the fields, directing water from a stream, and then that allows people to accumulate there because there's lots of food. So Aquarius is the civilization sign. I like to think of the deity, or the Titan Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans. And this really embodies the Aquarius spirit. And ruling planet of Aquarius, which is Uranus, of, taking innovations, inventions, and giving it to the people. So really they're about serving humanity and civilization. So if you have your sun in Aquarius, you're really trying to make a difference in the world to better humanity, like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. So you're trying to do something. I think of, Tesla or Edison. They had to have some Aquarius element to them, or Uranus element to them, because they made things that changed the course of history. And that's what they do, the water bearer. So when you have your moon in Aquarius, Aquarius being very much about social groups and social networking, someone with the moon in Aquarius will have social circles that act like family. So they get a lot of emotional needs and security through their friends. With their actual family, they can often seem somewhat detached. And these are people that don't like to be tied down. Aquarius likes to be free. So there's, and I think that's why they get a lot of their personal needs met through friends and social circles, because they're not as dependent on them. They like a feeling of independence. So when you have your rising sign in Aquarius, you tend to be eccentric, and futuristic looking. You're someone that's offsets the balance. I tend to find them very attractive people. It's like they have a unique thing about them, because they're such individuals. So they're intriguing and interesting to look at. So the last sign of the Zodiac and of winter, being a mutable sign, is Pisces, which are the fish tied together by the tail, and representing winter's end. And again, this is another civilization reference, representing the Tigris and Euphrates River, which was one of the early civilizations started there, of Samaria. So, again, it's a reference to water, and in wintertime has often been the rainy season, or the season when things snow, because it's colder. So, and then water has always been associated with human population and civilization. So the last three signs in winter have to reference that in the ancient calendars. So Pisces represents the subconscious and mysticism. sensitivity, intuition and compassion. And Neptune rules Pisces. So, I don't know exactly how that ties into the birth of civilization, but Pisces are very much into their into the subconscious. Can be very kind of otherworldly as a result of that. You have your Sun in Pisces, you tend to be a spiritual seeker, imaginative and intuitive. So you're kind of looking for yourself through your inner mind, through your dreams, through your sensitivity to others, through your compassion. So that's how you find your identity. And these people often like to express that world. I think of William Blake, who did these kind of very mystical drawings, like the one you see here, and poetry that kind of describe the subconscious world and the collective unconscious that psychologists like Carl Jung talked about. These symbols that connect us as human beings in a sort of a roundabout way of symbolism. And then if you have your moon in Pisces, this is someone who's highly sensitive person and compassionate. Your personal life, your personal fulfillment, the way you interact with people you care with is in this kind of subconscious realm. I find I tend to bond a lot with moon in Pisces people because I, talk in sort of mystical, poetic terms. There's a certain way I express myself artistically, and they speak that language. That's their language of their emotions. So it's very exciting for us to be able to speak our native tongues in that sense. So if you have your rising sign in Pisces, again, you're going to have this kind of dreamy look to you, kind of an otherworldly, magical look. Sometimes Pisces rising can kind of look ill or malnourished, or a certain awkwardness. There's a certain look to them that gets sympathy from others, because they represent sacrifice and compassion. Also, they're very they retreat a lot, like the other water signs. All the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Neptune, go inwards a lot, very introverted. Here are my final thoughts. So we talked in the beginning about daily horoscopes, and because they're so general, applying to everyone born in a given month, and provide no validity to astrology as a serious study of personality. So at least that's how it is in Western astrology. When a lot of people, I tell them that I practice astrology, they look at me with puzzled because they think of something that's just only has entertainment value, and doesn't have real value. Whereas professional astrology types people according to not just their sun sign, but their moon and rising sign, which identifies one among 1,728 types. So there's 1,728 different combinations of sun, moon, and rising, as opposed to just 12 different types when one just uses their sun sign. So you're going to have a much more accurate horoscope prediction if you factor in sun, moon, and rising sign. Of course, when you do a regular chart, a more in-depth chart readings include looking at all the planets in the zodiac and their relationships to each other. So I will talk about that later. But just with those three, which are kind of the big general ones, the big luminaries, which are the sun and the moon, and then your rising sign, which is the most, the eastern horizon, which is the most important angle in a chart. Those three give you a very strong sense of who that person is as an individual. So it's easier to understand the characteristic of the zodiac sign by understanding its seasonal attributes, mode, and element. So we looked at that, where in the season is it, was it a time of fertility and breeding like Taurus, or a time of death and regeneration like Scorpio? And you'll see people in those signs will resonate that kind of energy of the kind of season of which they were born, at least in the traditional mythological sense. So in the next video, Astrology 102, we will explore the rest of the planets in a chart. Also, I will cover planetary aspects that define the relationships between them. So we see how your planets play together with each other, and that really fine-tunes you in a granular sense as to how you function and operate, from the inside out. So I have deep respect for you if you never do a full chart reading, but know your sun, moon, and rising sign, because that shows that you understand how astrology works in identifying you as an individual. And I'm a Cancer sun, and if someone said to me, what a Cancer is, and they said, "Oh, are you someone that's very home-oriented and family and emotional?" I say yes, but that's not all of me, and I could say anybody has those characteristics. But when you throw in my sun in Cancer, moon in Scorpio, and Sagittarius rising, so I have an intense internal nature, deep understanding of psychology, and a kind of a restless physical embodiment, this needing to move around and do things, in my rising sign. You put those three characteristics, then I feel like you really are talking about me, and it's not just something that applies to everyone. So with that, I'll leave you with that thought, and thank you very much.